Hello and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me in the studio, he just got back from the forest of Germany. It's Andy Greenwald!
Happy New Year!
Woo!
We're back.
Wow.
Wow, you okay?
Yeah, it was a little scratchy. What's up, man? How are you doing?
Guess what, Chris? Happy birthday to us and this podcast. I believe this week or thereabouts is our 6th anniversary
Seriously?
of recording podcasts together. 6 years since two longtime friends sat down in a studio in Midtown Manhattan and talked about Downton Abbey for like 30 minutes.
That was it.
And, you know, we knew something special sparked that
Were
day.
we sitting on like two stools?
Two stools at Broadway Sound
Between two stools.
in the Brill Building.
Greenwald.
Happy to be back for another year.
Yeah, man, 2018, and we have a full slate of stuff to talk about. Today is Thursday. For all the Thursdays, for the next few Thursdays, we're going to be doing Dark Thursdays. We had mentioned this show a little bit.
Hashtag it.
A couple days ago, like a couple episodes ago, we had mentioned that you'd watched the first episode. I think I then checked it out shortly afterwards. And I'm smitten. You're smitten.
I'm excited.
It's a Netflix show. It's German. I'm not going to lie to you.
Stop beating around the bush. You
Yeah.
remember the way foreign trailers would always just have silence, basically,
Yes.
and then you'd get there and it was in Taiwanese? By the way, that's cool.
Yeah.
Just admit it. This show is German.
This bad boy is in German. You can watch it dubbed on Netflix.
But you shouldn't.
I'd recommend I would recommend you do the subtitles.
You do that straight Deutsche.
Yeah, I go no subtitles, so I have no idea what's happening on this
It's
show.
very atmospheric, though.
No, it's a great show. We're going to talk about that for most of this episode. And like the second half, we're also going to hit the first episode of Black Mirror. Obviously, for a comprehensive look at this Black Mirror season, you can listen to Binge Mode, which dropped earlier today. They did the entire bit, I think.
I also just want to say that this is... At the end of last year, we had a couple conversations talking about the challenges and opportunities of covering television in this just overflowing age.
Yeah.
And this is what we felt worked for us last year was the way we did Stranger Things, which was breaking it up into basically chapters.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are going to try this going forward with a bunch of shows as they come up. We are going to chapter watch shows together, probably on Thursdays. We're going to let you know in advance.
Good Doctor.
We're going to finally crack.
We're going to go back. We're going to binge mode Good Doctor season 1.
What do you know about SWAT on CBS? What do you know about what Hondo's been up to?
I don't acknowledge anything that deviates from Colin Farrell canon.
I completely agree with you on that. So we're excited about that, and we'll discuss as the weeks go on what's going to be next in the Thursday slot. But it's Dark Thursdays for January, 1 through 3 today, 4, 5, and 6 next week.
Yeah, and then we'll probably finish it up depending on how we feel about the finale. We'll wait, so I think I've watched a little bit ahead of 3, but we're not going to spoil or talk about anything that happens past the 3rd episode. Okay, so that's today. We're also going to talk about the USS Callister episode of Black Mirror, the first episode of the 4th season that came out right before New Year's.
I lost track, but yes, at the end of the year. We're going to talk a little Golden Globes preview.
We're going to talk a little Golden Globes, but Andy, before we recorded, we just got a little bit of news that we're going to have a little time on our hands this summer.
Yes, I think we knew that Game of Thrones was not coming back until 2019, but HBO confirmed it today.
Yes, a 6-episode season to finish the series will come in 2019. If you had to have a best guess, are you saying Q1, Q2, summer?
I think the thing to remember is, holy shit, they need to make this happen. So it's going to happen as soon as possible. This is not the kind of thing they're going to be holding for blockbuster season. My guess is late Q1. My guess is sliding back into the original Game of Thrones slot, which tended to be
wintry.
Well, the end of March, April was when the first few seasons premiered before it shifted to summer. So that would be my guess. Although we have no way of knowing, and we don't know if they're going to get cute and precious with the editing and the tinkering. But everyone kind of knew this was coming because they needed.
There was a rumor going around
winter.
that they were waiting to decide on the spinoff.
That's possible too. Look, here's my. This plays into my slate pitch, my kind of hot take on this.
Oh, okay.
My counterintuitive. You ready for this?
Yeah.
I don't think this is really a bad thing for anyone involved, particularly HBO, because obviously HBO always wants to be broadcasting Game of Thrones. It is the most popular show in the world. Anybody wants that.
Sure.
And as we've talked about many times, it is a culture. It sucks all the culture attention to it. It draws in all the oxygen.
Yeah.
Until this final season airs, HBO still has the most popular show on television. Until this final season airs, they can use the fact that they have it in the chamber as an incentive to continue to pay for your subscription to the service. You can use this to dole out trailers and use it as a promotional tool for their other programs.
Yeah.
Attach a trailer before they debut whatever new shows are coming later in the year that I didn't research beforehand. Barry, for example, the new Bill Hader comedy.
You're really. I'm waiting for you to acknowledge Stephen Dorff in True Detective season 3.
There may even be a third season of True Detective featuring Blade's own Stephen Dorff.
Yeah.
Look, that actually is a great point, because as long as Game of Thrones is still coming, HBO is the Game of Thrones network. And they don't have to shift to being, whether it's the Westworld network or maybe it's the True Detective network again. And to the point that you made, this gives them time to decide which of the 5 commissioned pilot scripts they want to announce as the spinoff. So they are just ready to go.
I would be shocked if there was not a trailer, like just a teaser for the spinoff at the end of the last season of Game of Thrones.
I think
like
that would
coming
be,
this year or coming early next 2020.
Production-wise, that might be really tricky, but
just like a shot, just like a dude coming around a mountain. You know,
they'll have news. You're right. I mean, they will have cast someone. They'll have decided.
Put an animal skin on a guy and have him like hanging out on the Matterhorn.
Weirdly, it gives them continuity and it helps. For the podcast business, it's a blow. Look, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's a blow.
Is it? So here's what we wanted to ask: in the absence of Game of Thrones, which is NBD, we'll get over it. What is? Give me like a show that you were super excited about for 2018 that you think we'll talk about.
Obviously, I'm excited for the final season of The Americans coming up. I'm sure that's going to in some way fill the pop culture void left by Game of Thrones.
Sure.
But there's some other. This is a year in general with some really big swings, especially from the streaming services trying to generate excitement. Obviously, we have another American Crime Story coming on FX, the Versace story. We have not checked out the screeners for that yet, but we're going to talk about it at some point. But Castle Rock on Hulu, the Stephen King anthology, we don't really know what that is, but it's kind of interesting. Hulu also has The Looming Tower, the big history of
Lawrence Wright's book about what led up to 9/11.
The path leading to 9/11. I mean, it's going to be a year of big swings. Sharp Objects on HBO too, the Gillian Flynn adaptation.
Yeah.
So none of these are like Game of Thrones worthy, but we are not going to be in short supply for big ticket events to hopefully get collectively excited about.
I noticed that you did not mention Amazon's Jack Ryan. I'm not going to hold it against you.
Oh, that's true. Also, there's a Coen Brothers TV show in quotes, coming on Netflix.
An anthology Western series coming from the Coen Brothers.
Buster Scruggs. Also, Maniac from my buddy Patrick Somerville and Cary Fukunaga.
I thought you were going to say my buddy Jonah Hill. That would have been funny.
My man, Jay Hill, and the goddess Emma Stone.
I love culture from the Brits.
You do?
Yeah. To go back across the pond and just dig up the nuggets.
That sounds so gross.
It sounds like I work in the Pine Barrens.
It sounds like you're a truffle hunter.
I really know. I'm a big fan of British TV generally, and I recently came across this new show called McMafia, which is on BBC. It is about a British man, young, handsome man, played by James Norton, who I believe was on Downton Abbey.
You can just assume if there is a young, handsome British actor,
he was
a footman.
Yeah. He is a hedge fund, who works at a hedge fund, and also his uncle and father are in the Russian mafia. And they were forced to move to London by the Kremlin, who apparently are not chill, and some other Russian heroin dealers.
Don't pretend like we don't all know that now. It's 2018.
FYI. Kremlin's not chill.
Nope.
This is a really cool show. It's very, very much like Honorable Woman, which was a big...
Yes, it was a big show for us.
A big show for us, and this is written by Hossein Amini, who wrote the screenplay for Drive and Snow White and the Huntsman, but, you win some, you lose some.
Hey, man, you got to work.
Really well written, really well done, just very compelling, very shiny. There's just, a level of prestige that, and quality that sometimes comes along with these that I think I maybe just am, adding on as an illusion because of the accents. But it was really great. I watched the first one through quasi-legal means the other day via BBC, and I think it's coming to AMC in the summer, so keep an eye out for that. It's McMafia.
This is a year, I mean, if you look at the top 10 lists that we came up with that Sam Esmail mocked mercilessly, there were a lot of things on both our lists that we would not have expected at the top of the year.
No.
There's just the volume so extreme.
American Vandal, we would never have suggested. Who could have guessed American Vandal would have come out of there?
But I also am into this, not to toot our own horns, but I think that the sheer volume of TV, but also the element of surprise is really going to help us with this sort of chapter viewing thing, because we can actually take time instead of just constantly throwing stuff at listeners and be like, check this out, and then forgetting to come back to it. We are going to watch some of this stuff together. this seems like a perfect segue into Dark, but we're not doing it yet.
We're not
I
going to
can't
do
wait
that yet.
talk about
Let's talk a little bit about the Globes because they're coming up on Sunday, and
Yes.
it's sort of the there are other award shows, but this one is the drunkest, the most convivial, the most familiar, the most generally, I think, the most televisually pleasing.
It's the most fun to watch.
I don't know whether or not that's going to be the case this year. Obviously, a lot has changed in Hollywood in the year since the last Golden Globes. But I just kind of wanted to ask you a couple of questions about how you're feeling about some of these debates. You know, one of the things with the Globes is because they divide things into Best Picture Drama, Best Picture Comedy, or Musical. You don't necessarily get the pure spring training of what the Oscar Best Picture is going to be.
No, but it's pretty remarkable that 2 years in a row, Hollywood has given us just pure classic musicals, like we used to make, La La Land and Get Out.
It's just one of the best.
It's just
musicals.
like the 60s
It's
again.
like American in Paris. But do we have a Best Picture duel yet? Because in the drama category, you're starting to hear more and more about Dunkirk versus The Post. And in this comedy musical category, Lady Bird and Get Out. I would assume that all four of those movies will get Best Picture nominations. Although there has been there's been a little bit of a like Get Out is not actually as seriously a contender as
I would
maybe
not
we think.
be surprised if one of those two smaller movies that you mentioned, Lady Bird and Get Out, which to
and
my
Call Me
mind,
by Your Name would also be in the mix here. Although I'm not necessarily putting it in the Dunkirk versus The Post.
I think Call Me by Your Name is in the mix and will get a Best Picture nomination. I think, to my mind, Lady Bird and Get Out are the two best movies of the year. I think one of them might not get a Best Picture nomination.
Okay.
I think one will. I don't know which. I just have a feeling about that. It's interesting. I think the Globes are less effective predictors of the state of the Oscar race than I think the Globes have more influence on the TV races and the TV prominence actually than they do in terms of the movies because, as we always have to say when we discuss the Golden Globes, they are voted on by a shadowy cabal of international figures who have zero to no credibility whatsoever and can clearly be bought off by bribery or flattery
I'm glad
or
that
both.
you've remembered that. That's your line.
That should just always be.
Here's the 6
an
years of you
asterisk.
saying that.
It should just be an asterisk. I shouldn't have to say it, but
Yeah.
look, here I am. That said, it can play a part in momentum in the other races in terms of like the actors in the performance races. But I do think the guilds and the critics awards are more generally they're a better predictor of the Oscar race. But I think that what you're speaking to, look, I mean, the movie races, the Oscar races in general for the last decade have been divided between the big movies that feel like Oscar movies and the other smaller movies that might be quote unquote better. What's interesting this year, and I think we're not going to see it reflected in the Golden Globes because, as you said, they're separated by category, is this creeping sense of conservative backlash among some voters. It's being covered on Hollywood blogs, and Mark Harris is talking about this a lot on Twitter, where it's not just that people are saying Get Out isn't among the best
Oscar
movies of the year,
movie, yeah.
but they are saying, no, we did this last year, and that we were politically correct last year, and that we, as if giving Best Picture to Moonlight was some act of charity.
Yeah, I saw something that was, I think, on Hollywood Elsewhere. There was like an interview with
Yes.
a producer who was just like, I don't put Get Out in the same category as like 12 Years a Slave, as if any movie starring or made by black people has to somehow be in this, where you wouldn't say that about,
It's
The Post and...
It's troubling, and it also speaks to the kind of insidious, not capital R racism or capital M misogyny or whatever you want to talk about it that exists in otherwise left-wing Hollywood. I mean, to me, the experience of seeing Dunkirk and what it did to me emotionally and visually is comparable to what Get Out did to me emotionally and just and how I felt while watching that movie. They were both masterpieces of sensation, right? Get Out deserves to be there. The thing to remember then at the end of this conversation is Golden Globes are crazy, man. Like, because someone who feels like me, who may be a quote-unquote journalist from Belarus and voted, maybe that vote for Get Out pushes it over the top.
Don't be surprised if you get to the end of the Sunday night and Shape of Water wins a bunch of awards.
Low-key, Shape of Water got the most nominations.
Yeah.
Maybe
So, like, I just miss me with Del Toro stuff, but like,
Did you see that movie?
I just don't like beasts, man.
You're just not. That also goes on your no list.
No cartoons. No. Like, I'm fascinated by this beast. That's not like my vibe. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? Who cares?
It's what you're saying is that's not relevant to your concerns.
Yeah.
Like, you're not worried if she's falling in love with a fish monster because, like,
Or if the fish monster is like the key to the Cold War or whatever we got going on
what
here.
if the fish monster's got a soul?
I'm sure it does.
I mean, spoiler, I guess it does. I haven't watched it yet. But, so, all right, so.
Before we get going, though, because I want to get to Black Mirror, I just want to ask you just real quick a prediction for best drama. Because it's Crown, Thrones, Stranger Things, Handmaids, This Is Us.
Yeah, I just want to say, obviously, I'm more interested in the TV side.
Yeah.
And in general, just like Seth Meyers is hosting, this is going to be an interesting night. It's going to be a fun night. The Golden Globes are much more fun to watch generally than the Emmys or the Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
The Golden Globes love making news. They love making stars. And that generally happens with the TV nominations, where what they love to do is get in front.
Your man Freddie Highmore about to have his moment then.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Because they nominate shows after 4 months of being on the air. They have such a jump on the Emmys. So, generally you can pick the winner of these categories by what's new. The Crown won last year, and Claire Foy won. Tatiana Maslany won an Emmy last year. She won the Golden Globe.
Like the first season of it?
In the first season, 2014. Yeah. So look for that. So, like, let's look at this list. Go through the dramas again.
Thrones, Handmaids, Stranger Things, This Is Us, and The Crown.
It's actually, I kind of respect the fact that the Globes were totally stymied with drama again this year. I just gave that whole spiel about like celebrating the new, and it's barely here. And they were ultimately they got scooped by the Emmys on Handmaids. Handmaids might win here too because of groupthink at this point.
Sure. What's
interesting to me, go to comedy. And it's Blackish, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Greenwald approved show, Master of None, Smilf on Showtime, which had aired, I think, 3 episodes when it got nominated, and Will and Grace. I love this. This is crazy.
Right.
What deserves to win here? I mean, frankly, okay, forget Will and Grace, but the other ones are all really good, interesting shows, and there is no clear frontrunner. Who is the Golden Globes going to anoint as a star this year?
Highmore. I'm not kidding, man.
No, I of course, because that's the other thing to remember. That show is crazy popular.
It's super popular.
It's super popular. It's also just nice to see because as much as this stuff doesn't matter, the thing about the Globes is, look, Maggie Gyllenhaal is nominated for The Deuce. Kyle MacLachlan's nominated for Twin Peaks. Top of the Lake China Girl is nominated here. I mean, this is pretty wild. Who do you have any outside the box, like, who do you think is going to get up on that stage? Because look at the performance by an actress in a comedy. Pamela Adlon for Better Things, Alison Brie for Glow, Rachel Brosnahan for Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Issa Rae for Insecure, Frankie Shaw for Smilf. The internet made this category.
Yeah.
Like, this is hashtag Twitter right here.
This is just a fool's errand to pick Golden Globes. I just have no idea what screeners this 87-year-old Hungarian person managed to get into like their CD-ROM drive. So I have no idea, and I also don't know like what backstage kind of like they've been doing like a really good for your consideration campaign.
Who went and had lunch with these people?
I'll throw out Pamela Adlon.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, it just depends if she did the lunches. You know what I mean?
Right.
Do you think, if you look at like best performance by an actor in a drama, Timothée Chalamet, Daniel Day-Lewis, Tom Hanks, Gary Oldman, Denzel Washington.
So here's what this is breaking down. It sort of technically should be DDL, A, because that's the best performance of the year, and B, because it's his last one. It's Oldman's time, and Chalamet is definitely like the hot pick.
And which of these people is young enough to have actually had lunch with everyone?
Chalamet.
Right, and they love making stars. So I think we should just remember that. Like, the Golden Globes, all award shows are arbitrary, but the Golden Globes, because of the shadowy cabal, it's pure entertainment. And if someone that we like, frankly, wins, then we're happy about it because that puts them in the spotlight and puts them into consideration for other things, even though it's arbitrary.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I wouldn't read too much into any of it.
Take a couple minutes here to talk about the first episode of the new season of Black Mirror, USS Callister, which is the riff on Star Trek, starring Jesse Plemons and Christine Milioti.
And your boy Jimmy Simpson.
My boy Jimmy Simpson. I'm very fond of Christine Milioti from her How I Met Your Mother days.
And Fargo Season 2.
What did you think? I mean, big picture, I could talk a little bit about the rest of the season. I don't know if you've had a chance to catch any of the other episodes.
I have not. And what this episode did for me was basically remind me of the enormous degree of difficulty that they've bitten off here, and one that has only been put into brighter focus with the increased episode count. The reason people don't do anthology shows in general, I mean, we call anthology shows, like American Crime Story, American Horror Story, where they do a different story each season. Black Mirror does it every episode. It's incredibly hard to start something over again every single time and have a fresh take on it or invite people in and tell the whole story.
And not have a format where it's like Twilight Zone, where it's just, this is going to be 22 minutes and we'll be in and out.
I think what Charlie Brooker and Annabelle Jones do is miraculous. I love that the audience they've garnered for it. I love the cast that they get together for it. I love the production values that Netflix now pays for that are evident in episodes like this. But I got to tell you, I thought this episode was really disappointing, despite some funny moments and some good performances. Because what it did was remind me that on the keyboard Black Mirror plays on, there aren't that many notes. And this...
Tell me what you mean by that.
What I mean is, I was really surprised. The episode starts off like gangbusters. It's fun, you know, you're in a different world, and what world is this, and what perspective do we have, and blah, blah, blah. And plus, the Star Trek, the deep love and mockery of Star Trek is really felt.
The riffs on it,
But otherwise, it was really recycling a lot of Black Mirror's greatest hits in a way that surprised me. And I kept waiting because often there are episodes like White Bear where maybe there's one or two too many twists. I was waiting for one more level to drop, and it just didn't. This episode took one of the central conceits of White Christmas, that you could basically, if you recreated yourself digitally, you would be a copy from the moment you were copied, and you would not know the difference, and you would feel trapped. So that idea, while truly horrific, has been in my mind ever since I saw it on White Christmas. The idea of blackmailing someone through their cloud history to do unthinkable things was Shut Up and Dance.
Right.
And then ultimately the takeaway that this sort of Gamergate bro nerd mentality is toxic and potentially sadistic.
Yeah. I
got that. I'm good with that. I get it. So I found the episode to be ultimately kind of disappointing because this is, again, it's setting the bar incredibly high, Black Mirror, to be doing this over and over again and to try to do two things in every episode. Tell a compelling story that you're drawn into with characters you're suddenly interested in a short amount of time, but then also fuck with your head. Also say something chilling about society. Not every episode's going to hit both, but this one kind of felt so mezzo on both points to me.
Which is why I kind of prefer the horror episodes of Black Mirror to the never thought about it that way episodes of Black Mirror. So this season, it's Metalhead is the horror episode. It's directed by David Slade, who did a Chris Ryan classic, 30 Days of Night.
That is in the canon.
As well as many episodes, I think, of Hannibal and...
great TV director.
Lots of other stuff. And that is a black and white post-apocalyptic horror movie that's just told in like 51 minutes. Hang the DJ, like you're saying, like playing from the hymn book, is a San Junipero cover essentially, which is and I enjoyed it, but didn't feel like I learned anything new about humanity or technology after watching it. But that made me think, you know, sometimes I feel like this show is judged particularly unfairly because of how prescient it was 3, 4, 5 years ago. Whenever we started talking about it, when it was still airing in England. You know, it started off as this almost like this secret that you would share. Like, did you hear about this British show, Black Mirror? You can watch like torrents and streams of it, but it's absolutely nuts. And then it kind of kept getting more and more popular. It moves to Netflix, and then it started slightly Americanizing itself, where I actually always thought that the strange look of near to late future England was sort of part of its charm.
Yeah, I agree.
That it was weird to have John Hamm in it, you know, and it was weird to see Rosemary DeWitt in it. And I do think that changed a little bit. I really enjoyed watching USS Callister.
Yeah.
I think that it's a testament to what they have done, that if you end a Black Mirror episode and you're like, this didn't either fuck me up enough or it tried too hard to fuck me up. It's just you're reacting to the fact that it did do that in the past.
Yes, exactly. The highs are so high, and the nature of the project is inconsistency. There's no way they're going to please everyone every time, and nor do they try, which is to their credit. There was a headline zinging around the interwebs the other day about how I only read headlines. I don't actually click through anymore. I'm kind of post content these days. Sorry,
it's okay.
It's just what I'm about.
Yeah.
But it was basically talking about how Charlie Brooker had a background in comedy, and what a surprise, you know, because it's such a dark show. Well, first of all, that's ridiculous because it is, in fact, always been a very funny and like deeply British tone of satire.
Yeah. Quick digression?
Yeah.
Have you noticed that like? I actually think it's really funny. Is it like the new thing to say about stuff? Like people say that a lot about Phantom Thread, and they're right. Phantom Thread's really funny. But what do you think is the biggest heat check you could be like, actually, I think it's quite funny? It's like people don't understand the level of humor in Sicario.
Yeah, well, right. I think it's actually, it's almost balletic the way the repartee ping-pongs between the characters. I would love to see them go kind of in that direction a little bit more, because I'm officially the last person to say this as we've crossed over into 2018, but a lot of the last year did, quote unquote, say it, everyone at home say it with me, felt like we were living in a Black Mirror episode. And once you've become shorthand for reality, maybe it's time to shake it up a little bit. And that's no shots at the creators, because they've been working on these episodes for quite some time, and it can't be immediately reactive. I have no doubt they will be able to pivot. But just in terms of, I think we're good on understanding some of the perils of the technology we're deeply enmeshed with right now. We're good. Like, we get it. And so I'd like to see what can happen as they train their eye, maybe a broader scope societally, because one of the greatest things about the show in all of its iterations have been the casual presence of technology. That's one of the smartest decisions. And this is true for all sci-fi, but like, it doesn't have to be the focus of the episode, but the tiny screen they're holding, the way the doorbell works in Callister.
And even the way that it's baked into each character, that their relationship and dependency, and the way that technology is practically, it is almost biotech, and the fact that everybody always has headphones on, everyone's always looking at their phone, everyone's always, everything is connected and linked up, is just part of the show. It's not like, isn't it weird that we look at our phones so much? That's never actually like the takeaway. It's
but we're not far from that these days.
But I do think that it's more about like, because technology allows you to do something, is it actually good for you to do it? And that's, Archangel does that a lot. I would say, because you brought this up in the beginning, that, and far be it from me to be like how he'd fix it or whatever with Black Mirror, because I think it's actually one of those shows that is just almost underrated now, because we're kind of accustomed to it. But if they had done like a 4-episode or 5-episode season of just USS Callister, and those beats had been played out, and then the third episode is when we find out that Jesse Plemons is actually the bad guy of this show, I think it would have been pretty awesome.
Oh, I mean, there's no question that the level of, it's like the way that they burn story and burn opportunity and twist that in any other hands would be an entire season of television, or at the very least a movie, is staggering and must infuriate people who make.
Because you could make a movie out of Metalhead too. Yeah,
I think there are many of them that you could do that with. But I think it'll be interesting to see the next season, because these last two seasons of 8 episodes were conceived together and broken up for production reasons and for release reasons. But remember, at the Emmys, San Junipero won 2 Emmys. This is now a priority for Netflix if it wasn't before, because Netflix wants to win Emmys. And Charlie Brooker, because of who he is never going to just run to the popular thing and try to repeat himself. But I also think that he is not as crusty and miserable as some of the episodes would suggest. I think he loved doing that episode and curating the 80s playlist for it. And I'm interested in the San Junipero influenced episodes going forward. Hopefully not retreads, but a glimpse of technology that may not be all good or all bad, but is really more about.
Well, you should check out Hang the DJ. Maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'll
watch
it tonight.
Let's talk about another Netflix show, and it's one that we're going to talk about for the next couple of Thursday episodes, and that's Dark.
Let's do Dark.
So, on one hand, this is kind of random because it's this German show. Netflix has been doing a lot of international TV trawling and bringing up, see what they can find. What's the Sabura? Was that the Italian mafia show that you were reading the book of?
Yeah, I read that book, and I feel so gross. The things that the people did in this book to each other with their bodies and the guns.
It's a global television network. They're looking for stuff, but
original language stuff from all of the major regions of the world.
They got one in Dark,
and this is their first original language series in German.
Right, and it's basically it's directed by Baran Bo Odar, who directed my 43rd favorite movie of last year, Sleepless, starring Jamie Foxx, T.I., and Scoot McNairy.
No, he did not.
Yeah, he did.
You never mentioned the Sleepless connection.
I didn't know until recently, and I wanted to drop it on you.
You can tell quality when you see it.
Exactly. There's sometimes a show will come along. The shows can be early, shows can be late in terms of where they feel in the zeitgeist. This show seems to have, if somebody was like, what has TV been about for the last few years? I'd be like, you could watch all these shows or you could just watch Dark. Because it has a lot of, whether it's visually stylistic hallmarks of what I think post, say, True Detective Season 1 TV has looked like. And it also has a lot of the thematic and storytelling gimmickry going on that I think post-Lost television has increasingly indulged in over the years.
Yes.
So I think it's a very useful show to watch. I find this show incredibly captivating in a way that is actually a really refreshing watch. Oftentimes, I think that, we love to say that we would go to it. It's like the characters are what matter. We kind of think about it the way writers would often talk about, well, I started with the characters, and the characters matter here. But what matters really is the architecture of the storytelling and the connections between all these characters across time. And I don't know, man. I think actually the emotional impact of the show actually comes out of the narrative fireworks. It's almost soap operatic in that way. So it's kind of has like a different sensation. It's for as dark as it is, no pun intended, it's actually quite an entertaining watch.
I think I'm glad we've divided this into segments, because for me, it was the third episode that sealed the deal. And again, that's also instructive for how TV works now, because with Netflix, you can do that. You don't really have you can just not worry about leaving too many breadcrumbs, because you assume people will just flow right into the next one, and then it takes to the third episode to realize the scope of what they're doing here in terms of time travel and in terms of repetition, in terms of characters interacting with each other's lives, and the weight of the sorrow that permeates this show really begins to become apparent and resonate with the viewer in the third episode in a way that I really appreciate it. I think that this, in general, one thing we've learned from whatever age of TV we're in now is that it is really hard to make TV. And there are a lot of things that you have to do to get a passing grade from what has to be the most demanding audience in the history of the medium. And
easily distracted.
Easily distracted. And I think that speaks to your point, which is there are things that I could harp on that I was not sure about going into this. The level of detail lavished on some characters, or particularly the lack thereof in the early going when you don't know who these people are. The titular darkness, which frankly, there's only one how I'd fix it for the show, which is that I kind of wish at one point Lil Rel Howery would show up, like at the end of Get Out, and just...
Are you doing Hollywood Fixer for dark?
And like, just
what,
riff.
Does it have to be so dark? Are we sure it has to be dark?
I just want Lil Rel to show up and just comment for like a minute.
Okay.
Just like on all the dead birds.
Yeah.
And then walk away.
Right.
I kind of need that, just a little squeeze of acid on the entree, to lighten the palate, just a little bit. But the things that the show does well are, it does so well.
Yes.
And you named it. We will talk a lot, I'm sure, about just the artful construction of something. I mean, time travel is the hardest thing to design.
Yes, and it also weirdly has so many amateur experts about time travel that I would never touch it with a 10-foot pole if I was writing something where I was just like, what if we had time travel? It's like, do you know how many people out there saw Primer once and think that they understand the rules of like astrophysics better than you do?
Yeah.
It's crazy. And it's like, but they actually, look, they do just enough things here that are kind of like, let's have a guy in a hood wandering around the forest. And like, we don't have to explain this yet because that'll give it enough menace and mystery that maybe we can kick the can down the road about how this all actually works.
Yes. Well, also, I would say that time travel really, doing a story with time travel really is setting yourself up to fail, because if you get any of the other components wrong, not the astrophysics, but I don't actually care about that person stuck in time, then you start pulling the threads.
Yeah.
And this show artfully avoids that by giving us the pathos and then linking it to other characters and even linking it to new characters who are, in fact, younger versions of characters we've already met.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to call out before we delve into the specifics that I really admire about the show is the production design, and the vibe is just outstanding.
Yeah,
and
it's set in this town of Winden, which is this small town in Germany in the sort of forest region where it rains seemingly 23.
How do you think their local tourist board feels about this show?
I don't know, but let me tell you this. I need to know what kind of boutiques these guys are hitting, because everybody is draped up in the finest of Patagonia.
Oh,
but
for
like
real?
the Audi version of Patagonia, so it's just like really cool, apparently very warm but water-resistant parkas.
These guys look fucking great drenched.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah.
And by the way, the windshield wipers on those Audis that they've got in the small towns, just cutting through the rain.
Yo, can you really have Audis like that on a German police detective
That's what I was
salary?
wondering. Is that just normal over there?
Or yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that do they just like hand out Audis when you turn 40? Like, yo, you earned it.
You earned it.
Yeah.
Like this is what socialists.
If so, Das Watch, the new Das Ringer podcast.
We are ready. Achtung, let's do it. The rain. I mean, we can joke about it, but we can also say like there is a moment that the show and it's highly, highly designed and curated.
Yeah, just like it was in The Killing, but instead of having 9 minutes of people smoking or whatever in The Killing, yeah.
But it finds time. I mean, these guys. It seems. Look, let's be honest. This is actually going to revoke our citizenship request, and I'm sorry. It lasted. The German version of the watch lasted 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's super Germanic. Like, this show is designed to a T, but it still finds time for aesthetic moments like when young... there are too many characters, man.
I got them all memorized, though. Let me know.
The guy, the main kid, Lucas?
Jonas?
Jonas, yeah.
Jonas is the homie, and then Mikkel is the one who bounced.
Mikkel!
I sent Andy an emoji of a panda just shouting Mikkel.
And frankly, I almost ended the podcast. Like that was one too far. It was like some blinged out unicorn with Chris's voice.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah. What if that's like the Black Mirror version of this podcast is just emojis shouting Mikkel at each other?
Look, there are people in the office right now just scheming.
MeUndies!
The social media team love this. There's a scene when Jonas is lying back in episode 2 in his room looking up at the ceiling when the lights are flickering and the rain is falling on it, and it gave me immediately that kind of weird deja vu feeling of when you're young and the rain is falling in your house and you feel both completely isolated but also very much like a part of whatever's happening. There's a youthful feeling. It's
no accident the characters we're responding so strongly to the show and the characters are either 16 or 40.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
It's a great point. Look, this is the art house Stranger Things.
Yes.
You know, there is no question about that. It's going back to the 80s. It has a few era affectations. You know, the candy commercials in Germany from the 80s seem just as delightful.
There's
as the
also
ones
a
from
small town boredom that happens of just like, do you want to smoke pot? Do you want to play video games? Do we walk through this forest or down? I mean, like for real, people of Germany, figure out some safe pathways for your children to walk through a forest or like who? Okay, you have kids.
Yeah.
Like, what are the chances that you would ever be like, feel free to take the forest route to school by yourself?
Listen,
do children's folktales tell us nothing about the dangers of going through a forest?
The jury is still out on nature versus nurture, but one thing I know about children that were birthed from my DNA is that forest play is never going to be an issue. Let's go back to my favorite moment of the show when a only child sat alone in his room. And I'm like, yeah, that moment was real resonant and dope.
Right.
There's nothing about the rest of the show where I'm like, let's ride bikes.
No. I think the big difference between this and Stranger Things is that Stranger Things actually has, I would say, pretty sus mythology undergirding it, like in terms of the upside down or whatever the dark part of that the show is. And its entire charm is based on having a murderer's row of kids who are just like super charming that you want to spend time with, who perfectly get the sort of patter that happens between teenagers. Mm-hmm. This show actually has a bunch of super like stoic Germanic people. Mm-hmm. You can't pick them out of a lineup. I only can because like I'm just so into this show and I'm like, that's Ulrich and that's
I get it now.
Yeah, but we don't need to know that much about these people. We're learning as the show goes on and we get the flashbacks, but like the difference between Bartos and Jonas is not as important.
By the way, Bartos is a cool ass name. I'm super into the kid being named Bartos. I mean, look, maybe it's,
are we selling the show?
Maybe it's trifling.
Zach, are you more or less interested in the show based on this discussion? Thumbs up.
Let's talk specifically about the third episode, because for me that's when everything flipped. And the third episode is when it suddenly switches, goes back in time 33 years.
Yeah,
and
this one's called Past and Present. Yeah,
and one thing that I think is important to note, purely from like we've been watching TV for a while and from a structural level, is that an enormous amount of television from the last decade, particularly British television, has been about the search for a missing child or a missing teenage girl, mm-hmm. Or presumably dead girl or a dead child, and the reaction of what among the community and how that happened, Broadchurch,
We talked about the bad news
killing.
relay where there's always
Yes.
that point in the first episode where everybody's like, somebody finds out and they're crying and they run to the next person and they start crying.
Which originated with Twin Peaks and then
Yeah.
has been sort of watered down since. What I really appreciated about the show in the third episode is you realize, no, this isn't that. We are going to spend time with the missing kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that is deeply disconcerting and disorienting. We are not used to that experience. And all of a sudden it becomes something else. And because this is a German show and not Stranger Things, it's not the Spielberg version. When Mikkel shows up in 1986, he is not 11.
Yeah.
He is not like a magic child who just wants to find a walkie-talkie buddy. He is gone.
Yeah.
And in the wrong place, and his parents aren't his parents. And that the emotional strings that you don't really realize are being played in the first two episodes are thrumming, man. It's happening.
Yeah.
And that feeling of dislocation, that feeling of being trapped in an inevitability that we all are in, really, really resonated. And I think that, you know, we could talk about, and maybe we already have been making jokes about a traditional Germanic reserve, but the reserve is played very well in the show. It
Yes.
holds back until it needs it, so that when you first see the character who I'm not even gonna try with names, who's the detective picking up the birds as an adult in the
Charlotte?
second episode. Man, you were really on
Charlotte's
this.
my favorite. Charlotte and Ellie. Yeah.
Damn, we picking up the birds.
Her deaf daughter.
With a little
Yeah.
like music playing. I'm like, well, this is just, you know, it looks cool,
Mm-hmm.
which was fine because it looks cool and I'm in. When we see her doing it again as a child, it adds resonance.
Yeah.
And I appreciate a show that picks up steam as it goes along.
Well, you and I both respond to shows that use place as character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talked. I think I talked a lot about how Narcos season 3 did a really good job of. I mean, it's always done a good job of distracting you from some of the more ridiculous parts of the show by just its immersion in a place. And you watch this show, which is set in this small town that the entire town is not only literally powered by, but is overpowered by the presence of this nuclear plant that has some kind of secret deep inside of it, in which we are waiting to find out exactly what it is. And you really do get the case, you get the sense that these people have been living or trapped in this place their entire lives, and that they're inexorably drawn to one another. Yet, you know, some of the most effective moments are when some of the characters are just like, "I just want to get out of this bullshit town."
And we realize they haven't. Or
Yeah,
they
and it's
can't.
like, well, I have an Audi that can
two-
go from 0 to 60 kilometers.
But I'm only ever going to go 5.
Yeah.
And two things to end on. One, I'm in on Narcos season 4.
I know you are. I know you
The
are.
god Diego Luna.
We're
Are you
gonna
kidding
we're-
me?
And
Pena?
yeah, Pena's in the
Are
building.
you kidding me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm in. That just file that away
Okay.
for future usage. 2, one thing to track as we go through this season and as we watch TV for the rest of the year is to think about the ways that this has become a global conversation. And for a long time, the TV business really was an American business. We were exporting shows around the world, and maybe they would be adapted to local markets. But our tastes were generally driven from things that were created here. Then we went into an era where British shows or other shows would be adapted. Homeland was an Israeli
This
show.
will be adapted.
The Office was obviously adapted.
Yeah.
There was The Returned, which was a really cool atmospheric French show that became a kind of a pointless American show
Right.
on A&E. Now we're having some of the things we're putting out. Not only now do we have an appetite for foreign shows in their original language or British shows just being shown, like we were talking about Black Mirror, which is actually becoming kind of a hybrid production at
Sure.
this point. But
Much to my chagrin.
but now we've put things out into the world for so long, be it Lost or Stranger Things, and now the world is echoing them back to us in their own way.
Absolutely.
Which is really fascinating. And to your point, this won't be remade because this is a Netflix global show.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Um,
So and they've already greenlit a second season.
so it's fascinating to see
No duh,
the
yeah.
way the things that we're putting out are coming back to us and maybe what they have to say about our own, the types of shows that we want to make, and then how that filters through different countries. So for us, I mean, Stranger Things, I think critics and fans alike
Yeah.
would call it an exercise in a certain kind of nostalgia. We talked about, when we were covering season 2, that there was a kind of a pro-American innocence to the 80s that the show, I don't want to make it political, but there's a yearning and a missing for the simplicity of it. Good guys, bad
Yeah,
guys,
of course.
upside
And that
down.
was exactly also like the entire, from what I understand, as being a 7-year-old when it happened, but the appeal of the Reagan era
Yes.
was telling these older voters we can go back to the Truman era or whatever.
Now you do a show from Germany that is looking backwards to the 80s, and very, very intentionally, Chernobyl is mentioned frequently. Chernobyl was not an abstract. If you're in Germany, it's not so far away.
Right, and if you were living in a town with a nuclear power plant, it probably loomed over your everyday life.
And if you're living in a country that is only, even then, just 4 decades removed from catastrophic war and bombing, and still split in half, what does that mean to look backwards? And so I think the show operates on a number of levels. Obviously, we're covering it because it's super fun.
Yeah. I mean, I think you and I are responding to it because there's an element of supernatural stuff to it, but there's also an element of a kind of midlife crisis, like malaise of you feeling like you're repeating the sins and the mistakes of the past.
It's like twice a week in a podcast studio. I get it.
Oh,
I feel it.
Auf Wiedersehen.
So who are you riding for? So Charlotte's your favorite character?
I really like Charlotte. I'm kind of into Jonas, man.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm about that Bartos life.
You like Bartos?
Bartos has bars.
When is Bartos' mixtape coming out? You know Bartos has a grime tape.
He has a bag of drugs.
Yes.
That looks, like, no judgment, but that looks like he could just, he could basically form Odd Future. You know what I mean? Like, that dude could just be making tapes.
That guy has Brockhampton living in his house.
That guy could revolutionize culture in Germany with that bag. So
I can't wait to revolutionize culture in Germany with you next week. We'll be talking about the Globes, reviewing that on Monday. And then we will jump on Dark episodes 4, 5, and 6, which are good ones.
And we've got The Shy to talk about coming up soon. We've got the Versace show coming up. It's a good time.
Yeah, man. I'm so excited to be in 2018 with you.
Happy New Year, James.